All right, so in this new section, we're going to talk about authentication, and we're going to use Auth because Auth provides a simple way of doing our authentication, and of course, they give us the login and logout, so we don't have to focus a lot of time in doing the login and the logout. We can easily get it from Auth, and that's it. You're not going to spend a lot of time there. Now, all of the logic of getting the tokens, storing the tokens, going through the server, of course, we're going to do all of that because that's, the main point. But again, we're going to use Auth. So if you don't have an account, you will need to go and do it. But first, we're going to do something else. So first, before we can log in and we can log out, we need the very specific buttons of login and log out, right? So I'm going to go to our project, and I'm going to go to the components and go to the includes, and I'm going to go to the header where we have all the links. And I'm just going to add two very simple links. Now, they are not links, they are just buttons, so we don't need to wrap them on a link component. We just need to do a span in this case, and I've added a class name. So I'm going to do class name, and I'm going to say that this one is the nav item, and then nav link, and this is, of course, for Bootstrap. And then, of course, this one is going to be the login, and then we're going to do a logout. So I'm going to say login, I'm going to copy this one, going to go at the bottom, and this one is going to be logout. Pretty simple stuff. All right, logout. Okay, so of course we need to provide an on-click so we can do something. Right now we are not going to do anything. We're just going to do an alert, so we can just double check that something is happening when we click them, and then of course we're going to make this a little bit better. We're going to go through the logic of Auth. So if we go right here, if I click it, we get the login, and then we get the logout. That's cool. All right, so okay, that works. So now you will need an account for Auth. So I'm already logged in, I've already have an account, and if I go to applications, I've had a different application I was testing, but that's okay. I'm going to use a new one. We're going to do everything together, don't worry. So what you will need to do, of course, go to Auth. If you don't have an account, just create one, and at the end of the day, once you're logged in, you're going to go to the dashboard. You're going to be redirected right here. Okay, so again, once you're logged in, we will need to create an application. So you can do it from here, or you can go to applications, and if you have many applications, they will show right here. So in this case, we want to create a new one. So I'm gonna create a new application, and I already have a different one called next app, and I'm gonna call this one next app _x. Now at the bottom, it's gonna say choose an application type. It's native I believe for native elements, then single page application, regular web applications, and machine to whatever. So we're going to select this one, single page web applications. Although our application is not really a single page application, it's a server side application. So it doesn't matter. We're going to select this one, and I'm going to just click on create. All right, it's going to take a few seconds, and after it's done, you're going to get redirected right here. Right? Very, very, very cool. Okay, so the first thing we need to take care of is going to be the callbacks and, the setting up. So at the bottom, whenever you're inside your application, you're going to get 4 different options. So the first one is going to be the quick start. So the quick start, it's just they give you some information of what you will need to do. So if you are creating a project with Angular, if you go here, it will give you all the documentation of how to use Auth with a single page Angular application. In this case, we're going to use React. So here, it's pretty much everything we need. Now, if we think about this, our application is not a React application. It uses React. Our application is a server side with Next. So we don't have documentation with that. We can use most of the things that they give us right here, and we'll use this. But we need to change how this works in a nutshell. But that's okay. Let's go back. If I go all the way to the top, I'm going to go to the settings. And on the settings, we're going to have some options, right? So this is what we will need to do. And the first thing we need to modify is the callback URL. So again, if we think about this, we're going to go to login. When we click login, the application will redirect us to a login place, right? They're going to give us a window where we can put the user, the password, and everything else. And at the end, and of course, all of this is going to happen on the Auth or O server. Will not happen on localhost. It's going to be redirected to a different place. Now, on that place, after we log in, or maybe actually we log in, the server, the Auth server, needs to redirect us back to our application, which is, localhost. So this is the allowed callback URL. We need to put something right here. So in this case, I'm going to put our domain, which is http, then colon // and it's localhost, and then 3000. If you're, of course, you're running your application in a different port, you'll need to put your port, right? And now then we need to provide where we want to go. If we put this is going to go to home. And maybe I don't want to go to home. I want to go to a different section. I'm going to call it login and then, I don't know, success, because again, makes sense. We don't have this section. We will create it in a couple minutes. You can use whatever name you want, but I will recommend for you to use the same names because then later we're going to go back to this section. Okay, so the next thing is going to be the allowed web origins. If you're saying that the application is going to come, it's going to go from localhost, you need to, be specific. You need to say that the logins are going to, come out from here, from localhost. And of course, all of this is going to happen in development, right? In the development world or realm. When we go to production, we will need to modify these settings, but that's okay. We will do it at the end when we push this to production. All right. So for now, this looks good. We get the web origins. We need to put one more because it's going to be the allowed logout URL. If we click logout, we're going to trigger that logout, and it's going to come from localhost. So we need to say, dude, it's going to come from here. All right, and everything else is good. So I'm going to save the changes, and we are pretty much done with this. Again, I have they were saved. Okay, so once this is done, let's go to the quick start, and let's go to that documentation. So I'm going to go to React, and I'm showing you the documentation because later in real life, you're going to create your projects. And if you don't remember how to do it, you will need to go back to these videos and, just go through the timeline and trying to figure out where we did this. But if I do it with the documentation, you just need to go to the docs, and that's it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to integrate Auth with your application, and we need to install Auth. So I'm going to copy all of this. If you're using Yarn, you can use Yarn. I'm going to go to the terminal. I'm going to do clear. I'm going to paste it. I'm going to press enter and be right back whenever this is done. Okay, so everything got installed. So I'm going to run our server again, and I'm going to go back to the docs. So after we do this, we need to do something like this. You need to keep scrolling down until you find the create an authentication service. So we need to do something very similar to this. I'm going to do something that actually it's pretty much the same, but it's going to look a little bit different, and we will need to do the same. So we can need to add some logic to our project. Since we installed the dependencies, we need to use it. So we need to put something like this, all the configurations and everything else on a file. So I'm going to create a new directory on the root directory of our project, and I'm going to call it live. You can call this whatever you want, doesn't matter. So I'm going to say app, and then I'm going to say auth.js. And again, you can call this whatever you want. So I need to do a lot of things, a bunch of things. So the first thing is going to be importing Auth. So I'm going to copy paste. I don't need to do it again. I'm going to create a class called Auth and then O. And this one is just a class. And of course, we're going to do some things inside. So I'm going to add a constructor. And the constructor will have an instance of this and then Auth and O, or 0, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to create a new, I'm going to do pretty much what we are doing right here. So we are pretty much doing the same thing. I'm doing it on a different way. So there we go. I'm going to go and paste it right here. So notice that we have this instance of Auth that contains all the information about our account, our keys. And then we have a function called login. So whenever we want to log in, we're going to use this login function. So I'm just going to copy the login function. I'm going to go outside of the constructor, and I'm just going to paste it there. Notice that this one is making a reference to this Auth, which is this. All right, man. So then, of course, I'm going to go at the bottom. I'm going to create a new instance of Auth O, and then serve for service. And I'm going to create a new Auth O. So, pretty standard Auth O. All right. And then, of course, I need to export default. So export default and then Auth O serve. All right, man. Look, this looks nice. Now, this is not the most important. The only thing, we are exporting default and creating the instance. That is okay. Now, what really is important for us is going to be the keys that we need to use, all the tokens and everything else, the keys of our application, our account, and then all the functions that we're going to be adding. The login, logout, is the user authenticated or not, the validation, and everything else. So we're going to, of course, as we advance, we're going to add all the functions we need to make this work. But right out of the box, this one should work. This one should work. So what I can do, since we have this file in our project, I can include this file, make a reference to the login, just trigger this function, and see what happens. It is going to fail, I got to tell you, but then I'm going to tell you why it's failing and how to fix it. So for now, I'm just going to go to the top, and I'm going to import, that file. So auth o, and then service, and it's going to be from .. We're going to go to live, and then auth. So now, since we have a function called login, what we can do, we can say auth serve from the login, and I just can trigger that function. So auth serve, I'm gonna call the login. So this, of course, when we click it, is gonna go here, and this one is gonna go here and do the auth o magic. We're gonna get an error, but that's okay. So I'm gonna reload the application, and hopefully I'm running the server. Yes. So I'm going to go to login, and when we click login, it's going to say, oops, something went wrong. Callback URL mismatch. So notice that auth o is pretty much checking for everything. So we are saying right here in our configuration that the redirect URL, it's callback. But if you remember, we actually put the login success. Remember? So I'm going to change it back. I'm going to go, I'm going to say login, and then success. And again, at the end, of course, this is going to fail because we don't have that route. But we're going to get something else at least. So I'm going to go to login one more time. It's going to go, and now it's going to pass. And it's going to say login or sign up. We don't have a user. And if you want to check the users, right here you have a user. I do have one user for the other account, the other application I've got on my account. But I'm gonna just create a new one. I'm going to do Steve at Gmail. I'm going to go to sign up first. Sign up, steve.gmail.com, whatever. And the password, it's going to be testing123. Hopefully it's going to let me. No, uppercase. All right. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do testing and then 123. Of course, you need to put a password that you will remember. If not, you will need to reset from here. And again, it's just not fun. So once we log in, we need to authorize. So yeah, we're gonna say cool, and then of course we're gonna get 404, and it's because the auth o is redirecting. Everything went okay, is redirecting to login success, and we don't have that route. But notice that it's passing all the tokens and everything we need to authorize the user. All right, so far it is working. Now what we need to do, we need to make our application a little bit better. We need to add an endpoint with the login success, maybe show a message and everything else. Okay, so let's go to the next one and do that. Okay, so we know that we are passing, the auth o, it's letting us pass, but we need to create the endpoint and everything else. Now notice that if you go home and then you go back to the login, it's not even going to auth o. Auth o remembers that your login was successful, and that login will last 1 hour. So it's not even bothering in going to the login. It's just, saying, dude, you're authenticated. That's why we get instant redirection to the login success. All right. So now what we want to do, we want to create that endpoint, and I want to do a few more things. Because if you notice, we get no useful information in our application or the browser that the user was logged in successful. If we go to the application, we have on cookies some things from auth o that are not really important for us. We get a few things, but we don't care about much. What I would like to do is to store an instance of something right here where we're going to be storing a token from, of course, auth o, and then of course we can decode the token and just make sure that the user is authenticated and let the user pass to maybe an admin section or something like that. The usual way. So I'm going to go now. First, we're going to do that endpoint on the pages. I'm going to call it login success or something like that. You can call it whatever you want. So it's going to be pages. I'm going to say login and then success and of course .js. All right. So this one is going to be maybe a class-based component. Why not? So import React from React. We need to bring components, and then I'm going to do from React. Right. One thing left to do. Then, of course, remember we will need the layout. So we need to import, and I believe I called it main layout. Let me just copy from the other ones. Just going to copy from here, and I'm going to put it right here. Easier that way. So this one is going to be a class of login, and then success, and extends, and then components. Right. Then we need a render. What else? We need a return, and that's it. So for now, I'm just going to return the main layout with something maybe dumb inside. I'm going to say div, sorry, something went wrong. All right. Okay, so later, this page will evaluate if the user was, indeed successfully logged in. And then we're gonna, of course, gonna show something right here. If something happens, then we're gonna show this, sorry, something went wrong. But right now we're gonna leave it just like it is, and then we're gonna make this better. So of course I'm gonna do export default and then login success. All right, for now it's cool. So I'm gonna save it and I'm gonna reload the application. All right, we can see it there. And if I go to login, the application, it's sending us back to, the login success and says something went wrong. So for now, we are good. It's picking the login success and everything else. So now what we need to do is we need to create a function that will take everything that Auth is giving us back just to make sure that the user was signed in correctly. And then we're going to create all the entries on the cookies with the tokens and everything else. Now, again, if we go to the docs, everything is right there. So let me go back to applications, our application, quick start, and then React. Hey guys, it's me from the future. I'm going to give you a heads up. Auth just updated the documentation and the way to, to log in our in applications, and it's a little bit different right now. The thing is, I'm not that sure it's going to still work with our next application. Now, the documentation we get right here on Auth is for Angular, just React or Vue or JavaScript, but not for Next and React altogether. So on the next couple of sections, I'm going to make a reference to the documentation we have right here to copy pieces of the code. Now, of course, you're going to be entering here because you're watching this in the future, I believe, and you're going to see something really different on the screen, on your screen, because I'm making reference to the previous documentation, all right? Now, again, I'm not so sure this one is going to still work with our next app. And this one was updated to use React 16.8, to use the, the new state and the use state. Let me just show you use effect, right? It's just was tailored to serve the latest features with React. And again, I'm not so sure it's going to work with Next. So I'm going to leave this for the future, maybe do some, digging, just testing and check how we can change and make it work along with Next. But we are still going to be using the old documentation. Now, the problem is that, again, on the next couple minutes and next couple sections, I'm going to make reference to a documentation that you will not have access. You can still go to see old releases. And if you go there, I'm pretty sure you're going to get something on your screen, maybe a download zip or something like that. I'm not even getting it because they just updated this 1 hour ago. So they are still updating the server. And if we go, let me just show you, if I go to GitHub, we can see that they updated 1 hour ago. So this is pretty recent. Now again, since I'm going to be showing you things on the screen that you have no access, I just made a copy of the previous code, the one we had on all releases, and I'm going to upload that file so you can download and put it on your application and, make a reference. So again, on the next couple sections, I'm going to make reference to a file that contains this code. All right, just this code. This is the code we're going to be using, and we're going to use parts of this code, not all of this code. This will not work in our next application. I'm just going to be using parts of this. So download the JavaScript file. I'm going to call it auth.example.js. And when I make a reference to the code we have right here on the next couple sections, remember that you will need to go to the download file, right? To this file. And it's pretty much the same code. It's actually the exact same code. Okay, and one more thing. On the next couple sections, when I make a reference to this, you're going to get some of the keys and the domain and the client already on the documentation, all right? So of course, since you get no access to the documentation, you're not going to have it. You're not going to get all these, these keys, domain, the client ID, and everything else. So what you can do, you can get them from settings. If you go to settings, you have all that, all this information, you have it right here. So you just can copy and paste it on your file. All right, that's it. I'm going to upload this file, so download and make a reference to this and not to the documentation, your screen on the quick start. Okay, so let's keep moving forward. If we scroll down, keep scrolling down, this is just what we just did. If we keep scrolling down, we're going to get all of this, and it's the big code. And notice that here they give you a lot of information of what you can do. And we're going to handle authentication, get access token. So they give you information of how you can do this in your application. The set session, this one is going to be important. So, a lot of things. And we're going to use them all, but we're going to use them in steps. The one we care right now is the handle authentication. And the name of the function kind of makes sense. We have an authentication going on, so we're going to grab it and we can handle it. And if the user it's correct, then we do something. If not, we're going to do something else. Notice right here, check the console or error, or just go home. And on this one, we are setting a session. So, okay, for now, I'm just going to copy all of this, and we're going to do it, really in small steps. So I'm going to close everything for now, and then I'm going to open it again. Let me go to the app Auth. And okay, I'm gonna put maybe this one right here, the handle authentication. Okay, so when we go back to the login success from Auth, what we need to do here is to trigger this function. We need to call this function. This function will grab whatever information we got from Auth, and it will check if the information we got back it's correct. And if it's correct, everything is good, it's going to set a session. And this one is going to be the one in charge of setting the tokens on the cookies or the local storage and everything else. We're going to use cookies because our application, it's not it's not front end. It's back end and front end. So cookies is a better idea. It's much, much easier, and we save a world of pain by using cookies. Okay, so this function will do something, and it will return a promise. So this one is going to take a little bit of time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to wrap this one on a promise. So I'm going to do return, and what I'm doing, it's pretty standard, all right? I'm not doing anything crazy. So I'm going to go here, and when you create a promise, of course, you get a resolve and a reject. So of course, if everything goes okay, we're going to trigger the resolve. If not, we're going to trigger the reject. And this is not next. This is not Auth. This is just a common JavaScript. If you don't know much about promise, just look on the web. Something, information about how promises works. But they are really, really easy to understand. This one will take some time. The thing we're going to put right here, which is this, will take some time. And at the end, just to resolve everything, just like we would do with a network request, we're going to trigger resolved if everything went okay, or we're going to trigger reject if something went bad. That's it. So I'm going to copy this one, and I'm going to put it right here. Okay. So then, of course, we're going to go to this state. We're going to trigger this function. We're going to go to this state, and everything else stays the same. We still need to do this set session, the out results, and everything else. On this one, I'm not going to do this one. I'm going to just delete it. And on this one, what we're going to do is resolve because everything went okay. And on the other one, since something went bad, I'm going to do reject. And of course, if you want to add more additional information, you can pass the error. So I'm going to do reject. All right. So far, so good. So now we are going to be calling something called setSession. We don't have a function called setSession. We have an example on the docs. If you go right here, and it's pretty large, so we need to do a few things. But again, since this is our application is not just the front-end application, this runs on the server and on the browser. If we just copy-paste this, nothing is going to work. It's going to work only after you reload the page and you go to a route. Right? Don't worry, we're going to get there. I'm going to explain you how that works because it's a little bit weird to understand at the beginning. So, okay, we don't have this function. I need to kind of create it. I'm going to say set session, open and close. And for now, I'm just going to leave it empty, right? We don't need it. Now, there's one thing that is going to happen is that we need to trigger this function. We need to trigger this function from within our head, right? I'm sorry, our login success. We're going to trigger that function, and this one will return the resolve or the reject, right? Now, the thing is that what we need to do is we need to pass some information about what is happening of when Auth comes back. So what we need to do is we need to do a bind this with the handle authentication. So if you go to the example we have right here, notice that they are doing that. Is this handle authentication, and they do a bind this. All right, so it's safer to do it that way. So I'm going to go and put it right here at the bottom. I'm going to do this bind this. Right, really, really simple stuff. And again, this is just JavaScript. Okay. So now what we need to do from the login success, I'm going to trigger something, maybe on the component mount. This is going to take all the information we got back from Auth. It's going to go through the handle authentication. It's going to validate all the information. And if everything went good, we're going to trigger the set session and we're going to go back with a resolve. If not, with a reject. All right. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to manage this through state. I'm going to go and say state and I'm going to say error. And when the application starts, the error is going to be false. So when we go back to the login from Auth, what I want to do, I want to maybe show a div saying signing in, or show the user that we are doing something, that they need to wait. So for now, I'm going to do this as state, that error. So if the error is true, we're going to do something. And if it's false, we're going to do, this. The sorry went wrong. I'm sorry, if the error is true, we're going to show this one. If not, it means that we are still logging in. So we're going to do logging or logging in or signing in. Signing in, whatever, doesn't matter. Okay. So if I reload the application, of course, I'm going to go back home, maybe about us. I'm going to log in. It's going to go, and then it's going to back, and we get the sign in or signing in, whatever. So now I'm going to trigger that function, the one we just added, and this one will return something or, everything went bad. All right. So I'm going to go, and I'm going to do it on the component mount. So after everything gets mounted, we're going to call that function. So we need to include it at the top. So I'm going to go and import Auth, and I believe it was called serve, and it's from /live app auth, and that's it. All right. Okay, looks nice. Okay, so now I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to enter that Auth service. I'm going to use that handle authentication function. And this one, remember, that returns a promise now. So what we can do, since now returns a promise, because we've added the promise, we can do then. And after everything gets resolved, then and only then we're going to do something. All right. So what happens if everything goes okay? So if everything goes okay, I'm just going to console log okay, right? I'm going to do that. And maybe if you wish, after a few seconds, you can redirect the user. So I'm going to do router, something like that. I'm going to do push. And I'm going to push the user, I don't know, back to the about. Doesn't matter. Right. So I'm just going to redirect the user. Now, if something goes bad, what I'm going to do catch. And I'm going to catch the error and maybe show it or, do something else. So I'm going to do error. And what I want to do in this case is just change the state. saying something went wrong. So of course in real life you will do much more than this, right? So maybe you will reattempt to sign the user or send the user back to log in or whatever it is that you want to do. Okay, so let's give it a try. Now I forgot to do something. It was not working. I had to pause the video because I forgot to add the import. We are doing router push and I need to import router. So I'm going to do router and then from, if you remember, it's going to be next and then router. Very cool. Okay, so now let's give it a try. I'm going to reload the application just in case. So now what's going to happen if we go log in, we're going to go to Auth. Auth is going to send us back to the login successful. Then we're going to check the handle authentication. And if everything goes okay, we're going to see the console log okay. And we're going to get pushed to about. If not, we're going to show this. And this is what's going to show on screen. So let's give it a try. I'm going to log in, sign in, and then we go to about. So very cool. So it's working. So now let's go back and I'm gonna go to the resolve and to this one, to this set session. And of course now we're gonna do something here. So I'm gonna do a console log and I'm gonna console log the auth result. So just to see what is happening, because later we need to set the session and we are passing this auth result as an argument. So what do we get on this one, right? So if I reload the application and I go to log in, we're going to go forward, go back, and we get a response of this one. So if you notice, it's all the information we need as a user to authenticate the user on Auth, or maybe validate the token, the access token, the how expires in, and everything else, all the information we need. So okay, so pretty cool. So now what we need to do is we need to grab the token, store it on the cookie, so later we can be passing this token along to different routes and we can double check that the user is authenticated or not, maybe later to prevent routes and everything else. The usual stuff with authentication on a real server. But now, of course, we have access to what we want. Okay. So what do we need to do now? Well, we need to grab the set session and we need to do all the logic. Since we're going to be working with the cookies, storing all the data in cookies, we need a library to handle cookies. That's it. That's pretty much it. So I'm going to use one that's called JS Cookie. So if I go right here, I have the link. If you look on the web for JS Cookie and JS Cookie, this is a simple, lightweight JavaScript API for handling browser cookies. Now, and the keyword right here is going to be browser cookies. So if you remember, if you've been paying attention, we know that when we run our application, first runs on the server and then runs on the browser. So it runs pretty much twice. So if we try to do something that was built to work on the browser, it's not going to work on the server and it's going to fail. That's it. It makes sense. Well, on the server, we don't have cookies. We just have it on the browser. So if we attempt to run something like this on the server, it's going to fail. So we need to build different scenarios. One for the server and one for the cookie and one for the browser. That's why the information that they give us right here from Auth is good for us, of course, but not that good. We need to still do a lot of things. So I'm going to go to the JS cookie and first, we're going to install this because we're going to use it. So I'm going to do npm install JS cookie. I'm going to go right here, I'm going to kill everything, do npm install and install it. I'll be right back. Okay, so everything was installed. So I'm going to run it again. Okay, so first we need to import cookies from the JS cookie. And maybe you get an example right here. No, we don't. Okay, so that's okay. What we need to do is we need to import then cookies, just like this, cookies, and from JS cookie. So JS and then cookie. Very good. So now the only thing we want to do, is to grab some data we have right here, like the actual token and the expiration of the token. And I want to do something right here with the cookies so we can store them on the cookies and we can seed them on application and then cookies. So we're going to do something like this. That's the idea. Now later, this needs to change a lot. Now we are doing it so we can, learn how to do it, how to work with cookies and everything else. But later we are gonna change that logic because it's not really strong, right? That's okay. So I'm gonna go here, and I'm gonna first create a variable called let, and then expires at. So okay, so expires at. And everything we're going to do right now, we're going to see it in practice in a few minutes. So when we reach to that section. Right now, if I start talking and, not giving you an example, it's going to be a little bit confusing. So the only thing we're going to do right now is to get the expiration time. The user expires at, and let me just show you. We get the expires in. So if we put 7200, it's not really good. So we need to change this into datetime. Okay, and we're going to go here, and we're going to do something like this. We're going to access that auth result that we will pass as an argument. So I'm going to enter there, and I want to get the expires in. And notice that right here it says expires in. So I'm going to say, okay, so I want to access that. I want to multiply by 1,000, just like this. And then I'm going to do plus. I'm going to create a new date and then get date time. And this is the usual way to just convert that to, what we want. So get time. All right. And then, of course, I need to close it. All right. So the only thing we need to do now is to store these values on the on an actual cookie. So I'm going to say cookies. I'm going to use it, cookies, and we set a cookie. Of course, the first argument is going to be the name of the cookie. So x, jwt, and then exp. So this is going to be the expire or the expiration time or whatever you want to call it. So of course, I'm going to put the expire at. All right. So notice that I'm also doing a stringify. And it's because this will return the date time number. And we cannot store numbers on cookies. We need to store a string. That's why we are doing the stringify. Okay, so then we're going to do pretty much the same thing. I'm going to go and say cookies, and I'm going to set a different cookie. And this one is going to be the token. Now, notice I'm doing X and JWT. You can do whatever you want right here. You can put whatever name you wish. So in this one, it's just going to be JW token. Okay, so on this one, I'm going to access the auth result. And we can get this value, maybe we got it right here. Let me just bring it again. On the one that says ID token. This is the one we want. So we are doing this because later we will access the cookies, get the ID token so we can decode it with Auth-O, an Auth-O method and everything else, and just, let the user pass or not. And this is going to be much related to the preventing routes, the admin side of things, and everything else. We're gonna get there later, but first we need to do this. So okay, so when we run this set session that we are running right here, we're gonna go to this. We're gonna create a stringify and get into datetime, the expires at, and then we set a cookie. So we should be getting cookies right here. And notice that we kind of get it right now. We get the expiration time because I run this before I was done with this. But, we can see that this works. So let's go right here. I'm going to reload the application. I'm going to go to login. It's going to sign in, right? And then if we go to the cookies, we get the JWT with the token stored on the cookies, and we get the expiration time, which is in 1 hour, right? Pretty cool stuff. So now, whatever we want, we can request for the cookies on different parts in our application, or even, if we are on the server, we can ask for the cookies. And of course, we will get access to the token so we can know if the user is authenticated, and we can check the expiration time if you wish. All right, pretty cool. This is the first step of, doing all the authentication and everything else. All right, man. So what else? Well, maybe nothing right now. We're going to go to the next section, and we're going to do the login, the logout. Now, one more thing before we go. If I reload the application, we are on the about. All right. What happens if I trigger on the login? If I reload the application, login, of course, nothing happens because we are triggering this as a function. Now, what happens if we reload the application and the user is going to be, I don't know, let's of course assume they're going to be on the contact, all right? Let's say that the contact is a restricted route. So the user should not have access to this route, right? Because they need to be authenticated. So whenever we build the application, we're going to trigger this, this logic. We can try to attempt to authenticate the user and everything else. Now everything works right now because when we reload the application starts for the first time. We are going to log in. Login is going to a different place, then it goes back, and then we are doing everything on the browser. That's why when we trigger this function, this cookies works, because everything works on the browser. This is getting triggered on the browser. Now, if I try to access this feature, this validate token from the server, the application crashes. So you always need to remember that you cannot run browser code, something that's very related to the browser and not to a server, and expect to work every time. When we run this on the server, will not work. So first, now on the next section, we're going to do the logout and just complete the process, and then we need to make this a little bit better, just a little bit better. Okay, so let's go to the next one and start with that. Okay, so since we get our tokens on the cookies, what we're going to do right now is to do the logout. And again, if you go to the application, to the examples on Auth, you get a logout function. And on this one, the only thing it's doing, it's, checking everything else, just redirecting and doing a local storage removed item, it's logged in. We don't have this, we need to remove our cookies. And if you're saying, dude, why not using local storage? You're going to see in action, in practice, why we are not using local storage in just a minute on this section. Okay, so we need to create a logout function. So I'm going to go here to our app Auth.js, and maybe after login, I'm going to say just logout. So this logout, the only thing that it's going to do is going to log out the user from the instance of Auth, and it's going to remove the cookies we got right here on the browser. So first, I'm going to remove the cookies. So this one is going to be cookies. We do a simple remove, and then the name of the cookie we want to remove. So I'm going to do the expiration one, and then I'm going to do the other one, which was the other one, not the expiration time, just the token. All right, very cool. So then, how can we log out the user from the Auth instance? Pretty simple. So we got a method for this already. So it's going to be this Auth, because again, we need to make a reference to this Auth. And then we have a method called logout, just like this. Now this one, what it needs is going to need the client ID. Now, where can we get the client ID? Well, you have it right here. So you just need to copy and to paste it. Now, again, if you have some experience with servers, you know that you should not provide the data on the actual file, right? So later, when we reach the section and we enhance the project to deployment, we're gonna replace all of this logic with some server node, environment variables. But for now, we're just gonna leave it like it is. Later, we're gonna change it. So okay, so if we trigger the logout function, we should be, be able to log out the user, just like we did the login. So I'm gonna go to the header, and right here we are doing auth service login. We need to do the same thing for logout. Pretty simple. So I'm going to go and say service and then logout. And that's it. So okay, I'm going to save it. I'm going to go to our application. I'm going to reload it, and we're going to try the logout. So I'm going to do logout, and we are back home. So we are back home because if you remember on the application we specified for the logout callback, allowed callbacks URL, this is login. We get the logout and we go back home. So if you want to go to a different place, you need to specify it right here. Okay, so, everything's cool. So now if we try to log in again, it's going to give us, the please provide your user and password. So if you remember, it was steve@gmail.com. .com. This was mine and it was testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's give it a try. We log in, sign in, and we are back to the about. So very cool. And if we check the application, we are getting the tokens and the expiration time again. All right. Okay, so let me just go back to the quick start and let me tell you what we're gonna do, because it's gonna be a little bit weird, but you're gonna start, understanding some things if you don't get it this far, so far. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to here. So we're gonna build a function, and this one, we're gonna build something like this. We're gonna build an is authenticated. So what we're gonna do is that when we go maybe to the about us or maybe the contact, we want to know if the user is authenticated, because the only thing that it's validating the user right now is just this, the token on the cookies and the expiration time. But we are not doing any additional process just to check if these ones are correct. The user might have something else right here, or maybe the token was expired, and in our application it doesn't matter. So we need to add more logic. We need to trigger a function that will grab this information and validate it. For now, we're going to do something simple as this. We're going to check the expiration time. If the expiration time is more than 1 hour, then we're going to assume that the user has a bad token, that they need to log in again, right? They need to re-trigger the login. That's it. And of course, this is not very secure, right? Because we are just checking the number on the cookies. Later, much later, when we are done with pretty much all this logic and we are done, we're going to enhance, we're going to just make this function much better. We're going to compare the token with against the server, the Auth server, just to validate everything. But for now, we're going to do this simple stuff right here. So we pretty much need to do this. So what I'm going to go to the Auth, and I'm going to create a new function called isAuthenticated. So isAuthenticated. All right. So this is going to be just a function, and this function will grab the expires at that we have on the cookies. So we're going to access the cookies. We're going to say get, and I want to get that xjwt.exp. So I'm going to copy paste. All right, we'll make it better. And what do we need to do? Well, this one, the only thing it's going to do is going to return true or false. Is the user authenticated true or is the user authenticated false? So I need to compare against the new date. So I'm going to say new date. I'm going to get the time of now, right? I'm going to get the time. Now, if this new date get time is less than the expire at, is going to, of course, return true or false, depending of what the value we have right here. And of course, if it's true, it means that the token didn't expire. And if it's false, it's because the user, the token expired already. Pretty simple stuff. Again, this is not very secure. In real life, you need to do something much better. And again, we're going to do it later. Now, we need to do pretty much the same thing we did with the handle authentication. So I'm going to go and copy the isAuthenticated. And I'm going to go and say this dot isAuthenticated. And I'm going to say this isAuthenticated dot bind this. If you're a little bit confused in why I'm doing this, let me just break it down. We are doing the handle authentication, for example, on the I believe we are doing it on the here on the componented mount on the login success. And for example, if I don't do this and trigger this function right here, remember that this function is going to trigger this code. And on this code, we are using the keyword this. And when we talk about this, we talk about this class. If I don't do the bind this, when we make a reference to this, of course, the JavaScript is going to assume that we are talking about this class, the login success. So by doing a bind this, we are making sure that the JavaScript is going to search for this auth and the set session inside the auth because we are declaring it on the constructor and everything else right here. So again, if you don't do this, it's going to fail and it's going to try to find these methods and functions on the actual class where we are triggering it. All right, All right, that's it. So, okay, so we have our user authentication. We just need to trigger this function someplace. So what I want to do it on a very top level. I don't want to do it on just a component like the about or maybe the contact or maybe a different section. I want to do it on a very top level part, and then I want to feed that response, the user it's authenticated true or false, to all the components. So all the components will have this value. Now, if I ask you, where would you put this logic? On the underscore app, right? This file is like the first file that kicks in, and it's going to feed all the other components. So if we trigger some logic right here, after we get a response, we could pass it as props to the actual component, right? Makes sense. Okay, so let's do it. I'm going to go at the top. I'm going to say import auth o and then serve, and then it's going to be from the // it's going to be live and then app auth. Very good. I'm going to create one more let. You can create one common object and then feed the object to all of them. But what you can do as well, you can pass many things. So user, and let me just show you. So this is going to start as a user auth of empty object, right? So what I want to do, I want to trigger something. I'm going to say user auth, which is a reference to this variable. And this one is going to be equal to that auth service is authenticated. Now remember that this one might take a little bit of time. So we need to do this on a wait. Since we are using async, this is going to work. So I'm going to say auth service. Oh, sorry. Let me just copy it again. And then of course I need to make a reference to the function, which is going to be is authenticated. And since we did bind this, the application will know that every time we do this right here, or maybe this or whatever, it means the correct class, which is auth. For now, just makes no sense, but it's going to be it's going to work like this in the future. We're going to change it, and we need to bind it. For now, makes no sense, but that's okay. Okay, so when the application start, at the very beginning, we're going to go to the serve and check if the token expired or not. Once we get the response, what we're going to do, I'm going to do a console log, for example. I'm going to just console log, and then user out. So we can see what's happening. So of course, when this is done, it's going to go to get initial props and everything else. So instead of just passing the page props, I'm going to pass the user auth. And under this props, I'm going to say I also want to get the user auth. So now if you wish, you can pass this as a property. User auth, it's equal to user auth. So this one will be true or false, all right, depending if the token expired or not. So now if I go to, I go to the about, for example, you could put it wherever you want. I'm going to do a console log of this.props. I'm going to go to the about. I'm going to reload the application, and I'm going to go to console. All right. So what we get is user auth. So at least we know that we are passing the props. And we get user auth of false. So the application tells us that the token we have on the cookies, it expired. It's not correct. So we know that the token is correct because we just logged in a couple minutes ago, and the token expires in 1 hour. Now notice this, just watch this. I am inside the about. Now I'm going to go to contact, and I'm going to go to the about us. So now what we are getting is user auth true. So now the application tells us that the token, it's good. But what is going on? First we are getting false, and then we get true if we go to a different route. Yeah. And again, I'm going to explain you why in a minute. You always need to remember that the application runs on the server and runs on the browser. So let me do a quick break for my mental sanity, because I've been talking for like, 2 or 3 hours. I'm just going to come back and break it down. Okay, so after a nice coffee, let me break it down to you. Let me explain why we are getting this weird problem. Okay, so like I told before, Our application, when it runs with next.js, of course, first everything happens on the server and then everything happens on the browser, right? Okay. So if I reload the application on the about, for example, we are attempting to validate the tokens we have on the application, right? We have that. So the application first, before we get everything on the screen right now like this, happens on the server side. So on the server side, when it gets bundled and built and everything else, we are indeed triggering this function. So this is authenticated. It's going to the auth.js, and we are running this function. So this function is doing, okay, I need to check if I have this cookie. I need to get the value of this cookie. Now again, since this runs on the server has no cookies and has no local storage. So we get false. That's why we get false. Because we have no cookies. Now, if you're thinking, dude, we shouldn't be getting an error on the server, or shouldn't be the server just going down? Well, no, because we are using a library. And this library, when it's not finding the cookie we want, it's returning false. So this expire at is getting false. And if we compare this, of course, we get false. That's why at the end of the day, we get false. Right, so of course this authenticated is going to return false, the app will get false, and at the end of the day we get false right here. So when this it's done on the server, then we get everything on the browser. So the browser, it's showing us what was built the first time on the server. That's why we get false, and this is not changing to true on a new console log, because it's not running twice. It's just putting everything that was built on the server. Now, the next time I just maybe go to a different section, this new section is going to re-trigger some functions and it's going to redo some things. But now everything's going to happen on the client, on the browser. That's why if I go to About Us one more time, since now everything happens on the browser, on the client, we get a user auth true. Because we are re-triggering this function. This function is going again to the is authenticated, but now since we are on the browser and not on the server anymore, this cookies exists. So, we get the value, and at the end of the day, we get true, right? And again, makes sense. And if you're asking yourself again, why not using local storage? And it's again because of the same response. We don't have local storage on the server. Now, if I try to do local storage, like we have right here, maybe local storage remove item, or maybe it could be get item. Let's see if I can find it right here. Local storage. Yeah, just let me copy this one. I'm going to go to the is authenticated. I'm going to put async right here in front. We are not really using it right now, but in a few sections, much later, we're going to use it. We're going to do more complicated stuff right here. So now if I wanted to access the local storage, I'm going to do get item. And I'm going to do, I don't know, whatever, doesn't matter. And then reload the application, going to reload, we get local storage is not defined. So the server is just going down because we don't have local storage. So the server does not know how to handle, so it goes down. So it's much easier to work with cookies because you can get cookies pretty much from everywhere you want. Later, we're going to see that whenever we get a request, for example, we get a request from home. From the request, we can easily get the cookies. And that's why we use cookies. If you still want to use local storage, you can actually do it, but it's really complicated. Okay, and now, again, the main point of this whole authentication section we are doing right now is not to teach you how to use tokens or how to use auth services like Auth, nothing like that. It's just to teach you in what happens in reality with Next and, a single page application. What happens with Next? Just to teach you, and you need to be aware that everything first happens on the server and then happens on the client. So you need to always be aware that you cannot do whatever you want. You always need to do things in context. Things that works on the server will work on the server, and on the client, things that works on the client will work on the client. And you cannot run it on the server. Now, in this case, of course, you're kind of getting a problem, right? But of course, we have different ways to fix this. We could create an alternate function. We could ask the server, if we are on the server, we want to run maybe a different function that does something else. And if we are on the browser, we can run a different function instead of this one, that it's going to check the cookies, right? We could do something like this. Of course, we're going to do it on the next section. So let's go to the next one and let's try to fix this.